We talked last week about what positions on this Texas football team we had the most confidence in. But if you looked at each position group, how would you rank the position group you had the most confidence in to the ones you had least confidence in? From the strongest to the weakest. Inside Texas did it for us, and we discuss on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So once again, we're looking at Inside Texas article where they ranked the position groups on this Texas football team from strongest to the weakest, right? You always have to put weakest in air quotes because they're not saying it's a weak generally. And compared to most teams in college football, it probably is a strength, right? It's just, when there's a list, somebody has to be at the top, somebody has to be at the bottom. So I shouldn't have even put positions of confidence because it's more so ranking it. I guess it is confidence as well, but ranking it from the strongest to, once again, in air quotes, the weakest. We look at Inside Texas article and then the Texas men's basketball team. I'm happy the women play tonight against Georgia. So we'll get to see them go out there and do their thing, hopefully. But the men, with what you feel like is their proverbial back against the wall, went to South Carolina and got drove. So we're right back at square one with this men's basketball team. And so we discuss that if we have time. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hope everybody had a good weekend. I know it wasn't a lot going on. Some college basketball, a couple boxing matches I saw. I was out, saw some boxing matches, but not a huge weekend, right? We're in that period of just kind of waiting for baseball. And then a lot of people waiting for football, man, and no spring game. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's just a tough period right now. You know what I'm saying for our Longhorn fans that are just kind of waiting on the football. But I guess you got college baseball. College baseball is back. So, but yeah, it's just kind of that almost dead period right now. If you're not a huge NBA fan or college basketball fan. So, like I said last week, I did kind of like positions of confidence, what position I had the most confidence in, and I kind of came up with edge and safety. Like those were the two positions looking at this Texas football team going into the year where I felt the most confidence with, right? But what I hadn't done was ranking the position groups on this football team based on what we know now. And that's what Inside Texas was able to do yesterday. Eric Nalin, maybe Nalin, I'm not sure. And so I kind of want to go over his list and, tell you where I agree or disagree, you know. So starting with his number one, he has edge, and I identified edge as the position I was the most confident in. So that makes sense in terms of them being the number one strength, right? He says Ethan Burke will offset the loss of Barron Sorrell to help set the floor and perhaps even raise the pass rush ceiling. So he's saying that Ethan Burke may even be a better pass rusher than Barron Sorrell, and I certainly can't agree with that. Ethan Burke, really talented player. The ceiling will be defined by Colin Simmons entering his second season, Trey Moore playing a full season like he played at the second half of 2024 when he had 8 sacks in like the last, 6 to 8 games. I can't remember, how many it was, but he really turned it on. And hopefully a healthy Colton Bassick. In addition, there's plenty of depth we'll learn more about this spring, right? All the guys behind those 4 that he mentioned, right? How much will they be a factor on this football team this year? But yeah, I think when you look at this roster, you look at the position group, you look at, Colin Simmons being a true superstar, maybe a top 5 to 10 player in college football overall, period. At that edge position, that's the one group you're looking at that should be able to week in and week out cause terror to opposing offenses, right? And it really comes down to, like he said, Colin Simmons and Trey Moore being 2 of the best in the business at one of the most premium positions in college football. I definitely would have edge number 1. Now, I had safety basically number 2. He has linebacker number 2. All right. Anthony Hill, with a full offseason to focus on his coverage awareness and technique, will set him up to be a first-round draft pick. Leonga Lafau, with a full offseason to reflect on what he did right and wrong, and his extended playing time will make him better. Expect a big bounce from Lafau starting this spring. I love the addition of Brad Spence. That's the Arkansas transfer as an analog for Hill. Perhaps even more so, I love Ty Anthony Smith as an analog for LaFau. I can't wait to hear about Elijah Barnes once the pads start popping. So definitely when you have a player like Anthony Hill and then you have talent in the room like Ty Anthony Smith, Brad Spence, and Leonga LaFau, it's certainly a really strong room. I would put safety kind of over them just based on the type of players you've recruited, multiple 5 stars, plus Michael Taft coming back. But yeah, you have to have a ton of confidence in Pete Kukowski and that linebacker group and what you have coming back, led by Anthony Hill. So, them at number 2, there's no qualm there. I would have safety number 2, but 2 really, really, kind of splitting hairs there, right? 2 positions that are going to be really good, 2 position groups that are going to be really good for Texas this year. He has safety at number 3. He says, for these rankings, I'll leave Jelani McDonald at safety, though it's possible his role at nickel will expand, right? We've seen some talk or heard some talk about, is it going to be Jalen Gilbo at that position? Is Jelani McDonald going to move down to star? Will they split time? Do you move Jalen Gilbo to outside corner to mitigate the loss of Jahdae Barron? We're going to, probably see some pieces move around on this defense. Taft and McDonald would have to be one of the top 2 or 3 pairings in the country. Texas will get even better after spring when Derek Williams returns and Jonah Williams is done moonlighting as Moonlight Graham. I guess that's when they finally just put Jonah Williams on the field, right? Depth is largely unproven, but there are some quality options, notably Jordan Johnson Rubel, right? And so didn't even mention Xavier Filsamy, who was a 5-star. Maybe that's for a good reason. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I haven't heard anything about him. But yeah, a lot of talent in that safety room. And, I think Michael Taft, Jelani McDonald, Jonah Williams, Jordan Johnson Rubel, Derek Williams when he's healthy. I mean, that's just superstar level talent in that room, right? Rotating on and off the field. Quarterback. At number 4, Arch Manning will provide very strong off-schedule playmaking this season. In addition, he has leadership intangibles and toughness. He's sort of his own force multiplier because he will use his legs when needed. Expect more pocket movement, RPOs, and deep shots this year. I want to emphasize that he will make some really poor decisions while trying to make a big play. He'll learn from it, but there will be some hiccups. I completely, agree with that assessment of Arch Manning. He's definitely going to make a lot of big plays. He's going to wow you a lot. And, obviously any type of quarterback that takes chances is going to put the ball in harm's way. And, they can't catch as well as receivers, but DBs can catch too. So I completely agree with that assessment. As far as it being the 4th strongest position group on the football team, I would say after linebackers, safety, and edge, that probably sounds about right, right? Wide receiver, you have a lot of young players or unproven players. Offensive line, you're replacing Cedric Baxter coming off the injury. It wouldn't be defensive tackle. Probably wouldn't be corner the way that Jalen Gilbo and Malik Muhammad played last year. And it's Arch Manning. He does get the Manning tax, right? So, yeah, I would agree. I would agree with Arch Manning and quarterback being number 4, right? Because that is a position group that all Texas fans feel really, really good about coming into the season. So, number 4 makes sense, right? After probably the big 3, which is safety, linebacker, and edge, which there really aren't too many question marks about going into the season. Wide receiver at number 5. I love Ryan Wingo. I think he's a future high first-round pick. I find comps to Terrell Owens agreeable, but as far as his college career, give me Romeo Odunze minus Odunze's true freshman year. I think that's where this thing is headed. 2 more years of Wingo. DeAndre Moore's talent is evident, but his inconsistency is worrisome. Still, the big playability best personified by his fantastic connection with Manning against Mississippi State at over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns is unmistakable. Wingo and Moore are going to have big years. At least 2 of Parker Livingstone, Aaron Butler, Kalik Lockett, Dalen McCutcheon, and Jamie French will step up this spring in a way we take notice. And don't forget, they'll add a player in the portal, a good one at the wide receiver position. So that makes sense. Just you talk about what you were able to see from Ryan Wingo in his true freshman year, the highs from DeAndre Moore, the 5 stars that you have in that room, players from previous classes that we've heard a lot about, like you said, Parker Livingstone and Aaron Butler. So I have no issue with them being number 5. Wide receiver, there's a lot to be excited about, right? You kind of have to project, but there is still a lot to be excited about. Let me see. How many more are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, let's go to break. A quick word from the sponsors. And then we're going to do the last 5 position groups, how Eric Naline from Inside Texas has those ranked. And then we will talk about the basketball team to close out. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. That's fanduel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so getting into the next position group they have, there's 5 left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This would be the 6th strongest position group, according to Inside Texas and Eric Nalin. Malik Muhammad will put his late season struggles behind him. All right. That was like a big thing. You kind of just didn't hear much about Malik Muhammad all year. And then in the playoffs, it felt like he was getting turned around a lot. Will put his late season struggles behind him and be the player we've seen for the majority of his career. A lot of y'all thought he'd be better than Jade Barron last year. I don't remind you of that just to say you were wrong. I do to remind you of the type of player Muhammad is and to remind you that you were wrong. Right? This ties into safety. I'm not sure how much Jalen Gilbo will play corner this spring, but that's coming this spring or summer. He'll be better than conventional wisdom holds. One thing is for sure, Warren Robertson and Kobe Black are going to compete their asses off to start. Both have NFL traits, but there are ways from putting it all together, right? So there's certainly question marks about the cornerback position. I guess it sounds the most reasonable to move Jalen Gilbo to corner and then put Jelani McDonald at star because you'll still have a lot of talent at the safety position, especially with Michael Taft coming back, leadership back there. But if Jalen Gilbo ends up staying at star, then is it Warren Robertson? Is it Kobe Black at corner? How much of a drop off is that from Jade Barron to one of those players? So definitely some question marks, right? Still a lot of talent in the room, and that's the thing, right? We could talk about corner being the 6th strongest position group on this Texas football team. How many teams would kill to have a Jalen Gilbo, a Malik Muhammad, a Kobe Black, that may or may not start day one. So a lot of talent on this football team. Also, Santana Wilson and the true freshman will make some noise this spring. Didn't even talk about Wardell Mack. So a ton of talent in that room. Probably going to have a little bit of a drop off from what you had last year with Jade Barron. When you have the Thorpe Award winner on campus, it's kind of hard to replicate that. But yeah, I have faith that the corner will be really good. I think everybody in front of them will be really good. The safeties behind them will be really good to help mask, maybe what we're lacking a little bit at corner. And I think Pete Kwiatkowski will figure it out because that's all he's done for the last 3 years. Defensive tackle, number 7. If I'm wrong on the quality of Cole Prevard and Travis Shaw, then I'm in trouble. I don't think those guys are just good depth. I think that's a strong starting duo, even in the SEC. I would not be surprised to see Alex January open spring ball with the first team. He's lost a little extra weight and moving very well. Even with the addition of Hero Kanu, Texas needs another player out of the portal. But I fully expect one of the true freshmen to impress during the spring. We've already written a good amount about Justice Terry. Yeah. A lot of question marks in the defensive tackle room. I always say that, yes, Cole Brevard and Travis Shaw may be really good. Also, may be a reason they were in the portal, right? I mean, they could have entered themselves, but, well, they probably did enter themselves. I guess I shouldn't say that. But schools pretty much don't let, really good players like that get away, right? And Bill Belichick was coming into North Carolina, right? So he could have found a way to convince Travis Shaw to stay, and then Cole Brevard coming from Purdue. And so, I think it's just the high expectations, the high marks that we've seen from the defensive tackle position. Like I said, you have 6 straight defensive tackles that have played for you, either go to the National Football League or are on their way to the National Football League and played really good at the University of Texas. And so now you're kind of, out there in the portal, mixing and matching and finding players, or you're hoping Alex January, who didn't have a big impact, can step up, or, a Justice Terry, who's a true freshman, right? I'm not sure that I would put defensive tackle over O-line. I'm really not sure I would. Defensive tackle, I have a lot of question marks about. And maybe they'll step in and be great, for sure, like he said. But I wouldn't have defensive tackle this high. I definitely have a lot more question marks about this room than apparently Inside Texas does. And that's okay. That's okay. O-line, Texas is replacing 4 starters, but also returning real experience in the form of DJ Campbell, Cole Hudson, and Trevor Goosby, right? Which is my thought process. Goosby is more tested than he is experienced when you account for when he was called to action. And though Hudson is experienced, the center position is new to him when it comes to playing the position in games rather than practice. That's a very good point. I think the offense is going to catch a big break from being able to run the ball better inside with the trio of DJ Campbell, Cole Hudson, and Nito Imiazula, right? If so, that will take a lot of pressure off the entire offense, including the offensive line, when it comes to pass protection, right? So that is a good point. You are bringing back a lot of experience, but, Trevor Goosby, largely only 2 games, and then Cole Hudson playing a new position. So even though they've played for Texas, they're going to be playing for Texas like they've never played for Texas before this season, right? But I do think we'll still be really strong on that offensive line. Ultimately, I have a lot more confidence in offensive line than I do defensive tackle. Running back and tight end, I think I could, listen to the argument either way. And those are the last 2 positions on the list. So running back, Trey Wisner is awesome and one of my favorite players to cover. Versatile, tough, selfless, tough, etc., and tough. But he's a platoon back and a healthier room. The room won't be fully healthy until August at the earliest, mentioning Cedric Baxter. If Jarrett Gibson makes a jump this spring, then so too will these rankings. I'll be curious to hear about James Simon. Texas departed running backs coach was quite high on him. All right. So a lot of question marks in the running back room, but the biggest one is how soon will Cedric Baxter be healthy? Right. And to what level will he be healthy? And can he be the dominant running back, the number 1 running back out of high school that we envisioned him being now in what it would be his junior year? Well, I guess he could probably get a medical. I don't know how that works, right? It's his 3rd year at the University of Texas. Jeff Banks, this tight end they have last. They have tight end last. Jeff Banks and his new assistant, Jason McIndoe, have their work cut out this spring. Jordan Washington has stud upside even more than Jatavian Sanders and Gunnar Helm. Woo, but he's green. Everybody else is green too, and without his raw ability. This team needs Spencer Shannon to make another jump. He at least needs to become a credible blocker. I do have a sneaky suspicion that Amari Winston was undervalued during his recruitment. Versatility is its own trait, and he has that. So, a lot of talent in the tight end room, potential young players, but nobody you can point to like you could with Jatavian Sanders or like you could with Gunnar Helm and say, yeah, they're going to come in and do this, right? A lot of projection. So I can understand, right? Or I'm not even sure if Jordan Washington has a catch yet. If he does, probably like 1 or 2. So I can understand the hesitancy on giving praise to the tight end room right now. So we'll just see what happens, right? Steve Sarkisian has preached about how important that position is to his, offense. So they're going to have to figure it out, right? One way or another. All right. Quick word from our sponsors. And then this damn basketball team, right? This damn basketball team. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns also brought to you by PrizePicks. March basketball is here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game exciting. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Okay. So this Texas basketball team, they had the big win against Kentucky last Saturday, a top 15 win in the Moody Center. And I hated the fact that they didn't play for another week. Right. Now I get it. The Spurs are in the Moody Center, but they can play road games, as they did against South Carolina. The college athletes, I'm not sure how many games they had played before that. So, at some point you're going to have a week off in college basketball. The women haven't played since last Sunday and they play tonight. So that makes sense. But this is always the fear when you have a big win like that and then don't play for a long period. Even if you were to play 2 days later, people would say, okay, there could be the emotional letdown of having a big win against Kentucky and then having to go play this South Carolina team who doesn't even have a conference win yet. right? So I guess whether that was 2 days from that game or a week later, probably largely the same result, the way that they played, or the same fear that you could have this emotional letdown. But you go into South Carolina, and I feel like, and maybe I'm overrating it, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I feel like this Texas basketball team is against, their backs are against the wall, right? I feel like every game should be approached as if they are in the NCAA tournament. Every game should be approached as if it's win or go home. When you're this late in the season and you're on the bubble, and I know like the latest rankings had them as a 10 seed, but like when you're this late in the season and you're on the bubble, every game should be looked at as a must win. And you're going into South Carolina, and I understand, right? Like any college, game period, any sport, when you go on the road, that's tough. It's a tough environment. Anything can happen. But like I said, we're talking about a team that's under 500 and a team that does not have a conference win at all. They had not won a game in conference at all. And Texas not only goes in there and loses, they lose by 15 and were down by 22 at one point to a team that has not won a game. I mean, since when? Like, if they haven't won a conference game, when was the last time South Carolina even won a game? Like, let me see if I can find it on here. Who knows, right? It's been a long time, clearly, if they hadn't won a conference game. So, I mean, what the hell? Like, Trey Johnson, the only player that scored in double figures, and of course, he put up, 29? Like, I mean, yeah, 29 points. He's the only one that scores in double figures. But like I said, just to play that lifeless after the big boost you need against a team like Kentucky, to lose on the road like that, be down 22 to a team that hasn't won in months. It's embarrassing, man. It's embarrassing. And like I said, I've said it before on here, but I mean, Rodney Terry's gonna have to pull a hell of a rabbit out of his what to keep his job at this point. This just isn't representative of what Texas basketball should be. And you could say that this is a team that's never won a championship. This is a team that hasn't had a great deal of tournament success. But still, when you think of the University of Texas, you think of excellence. When you think of our athletic programs, you think of excellence. And like I said, you look across the hall and you got a championship contender with Vic Schaefer and that women's basketball team. And we're losing on the road by 15, being down 22, being down 20 points again to a team that's under 500 and had not won a conference game yet. And their first conference win, a blowout against Texas. Yeah, changes need to be made. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Hook 'em. Peace.